2, 1, 2. test, test, test.
Test, test.
Talk on the mic here, given the fact that it's the room. Welcome to the VA committee room. We won't be talking about Veterans Affairs, not necessarily here today, but thank you all for coming. Fourth annual Campus Free Speech Roundtable. I think what we have done as far as our, honestly, a tight-knit group here. Is there feedback going on? Sounds like crickets. I think is really having an effect. I think, guys, the pendulum has been swinging, and fortunately now I think is swinging in the right direction, much to so much of the efforts that you guys have been doing on college campuses with your colleagues, with your administrations, with students, and I applaud you for it. It's a new day, a day of freedom of discussion. We always talked about akademische Freiheit, the principle of academic freedom, which was always the hallmark of European universities, colleges, and then the carryovers here into the United States. Sadly enough, over the last 10 or 15 years, it became monolithic thought. It's one thought, and if you didn't think that, you were not part of the group, or you were actually something lesser to be expected. And so we're going to have a nice discussion today. I'm going to turn things over. Dr. Fox is going to have to leave here in a few minutes and let her speak, and then Representative Burgess. And then we'll go around the room just to do introductions, and then we'll throw it out for questions and discussions just like we have in the past. But again, thank you all for making the effort on a kind of dreary day here in Washington, D.C. towards the end of the session. But thank you very much. Dr. Fox.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. And I want to say thank you to the group that you have assembled here, too. And I'm sorry I won't be able to stay for the entire roundtable, but I commend Congressman Murphy for continuing to put an emphasis on the issue of free speech and involving many, many people in it. Since our last discussion, the Committee on Education Workforce has continued to work to safeguard free speech on college campuses. It seems crazy that we have to continue to do this, but we are. In September, we passed a bill to ensure colleges and universities are not forced to meet diversity, equity, and inclusion standards, DEI, in order to be accredited and guarantee that the First Amendment is adhered to on public campuses. And again, I want to thank Congressman Murphy for his bill, Campus Free Speech Restoration Act, which was included in that piece of legislation that we passed. Despite what critics claim, the bill does not mandate any political viewpoint or ideology. It simply demands from the accreditation process down to the classroom that all levels of post-secondary education refrain from compelling students and faculty to commit to certain viewpoints or ideologies. That is a very reasonable position to take. And again, it shouldn't even be something that we have to pass legislation on because you would think from our very wonderful Constitution that would be the case, but it isn't. So thank you again, Dr. Murphy, and thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. And again, it's almost makes you scratch your head that you have to ask people just to play nice in the sandbox and listen to other individuals, not have forced speech, not have people sign commitments. You know, honestly, I think some of this is the greatest peer pressure event since the Spanish Inquisition. If you don't think like us, this is how communism, dictatorships, et cetera, evolve. So thank you, Dr. Fox. And then Representative Burgess from the great state of Utah.
Thank you. And Doc, I appreciate you in so many ways. You know, it's interesting. I think we're finding out that our system has been under attack for quite a while. We didn't know it until just recently, the last few years. What I love about our country and about the American people is we have this tendency of kind of getting our little freedom bubble. We enjoy working hard and building our dreams and taking vacation with our kids and building legacies. And we forget sometimes there's evil on the very doorstep of this freedom. Once we find out, then we're all in. And that's what's happening today. We're finding out that we've been under attack for quite a while. The idea that we cannot have the opportunity to think freely, to be able to converse freely, that's at the core of who we are. As we get more confident about who we are, the way we think, we're more confident about this dealing with very difficult issues. We don't mind sitting down with someone that we might disagree with because we know that if we're nice, respectful, we come to the plate with a good thought that maybe we'll get them to see it our way. And then once we have that debate, we can go out and watch a football game together. That's old school. We have to get back to that. And I want to thank you for your courage, for standing up against this craziness. We're about to see our country go over the edge, but we now understand we're pulling it back. I also want to thank Dr. Fox while we're here. We had some remarkable hearings this year. One was anti-Semitism, 38,000 views. The American people are hungry for courage and for leadership. So I want to thank you for what you're doing to be here. And just know it was a couple of things. Ignorant and free can never be is one of the things that one of our founders told us, Thomas Jefferson. And the more we can discuss, the more we can be free to think outside the box, to take risk and think of ideas that might be different, might not be acceptable, might not be liked, but be able to do that, we move our country forward. And I want to again, thank you guys for being part of this conversation. And we look forward to making sure that we get back to good old common sense that I think many of us have grown up with. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Burgess. Great comments. It's just basically common sense. And in just a second now, we're going to go around the table and just I would love everybody to introduce themselves. If you want to make comments, I would ask you to limit them just 2 or 3 minutes. And then we're going to have some questions and see how that works. Hey, Alex, her placard, her card fell down. I will tell you, when we started this, thank you, endeavor, I was working a lot with Davidson and working on free speech that I thought when I was on the board there was really being threatened. I've, in my own personal journey, have now migrated to our medical schools, which sadly enough, this is not about taking an art class. This is not talking about a history class. This is talking about patients' lives. And this whole concept of monolithic ideology has somehow infected medicine. And this is where we are putting lives at risk. And I'm having to fight this myself just because this is what I do. The MD behind my name I cherish because I care about patients. I've taken care of patients, so many here and across the world that don't look like I do, don't think like I do. But I treat each of them with the utmost respect and caring. And sadly enough, some of our medical schools are teaching that that is not the right course. And I've been very, very vocal about it, have been attacked because of it. But I am glad to say, like with a lot of the other things, I think some of the tide is turning. And when you put sunlight onto an issue that you know is wrong and that common sense tells you is wrong, that sunlight disinfects that issue very, very quickly. And so anyway, we'll start. And I'll start here, if you will, and we'll just introduce yourself just to the group. Again, guys, this is being live streamed. And the little red button will push to talk, if you will, just because of the echoes in here. And welcome.
Well, thank you very much and good morning. Thank you for having us to this fourth annual event. We're happy to be participants. My name is Tyler Coward. I'm the lead counsel for government affairs at the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE. And FIRE, as you all know, is a nonpartisan nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting the free speech rights of all Americans with a special emphasis on protecting free speech rights in higher education for both students and faculty. And since our discussion last year, our shared goal of progress on protecting free speech on campus has really been a mixed bag. So let's start with the good. Every year, FIRE conducts our Spotlight on Speech Code ratings. In the last year, we reviewed 489 four-year institutions. 376 of them are public, 113 are private. The good news is that we have more green light schools, meaning schools that do not maintain policies seriously restricting free speech on campus. That has increased. The bad part is we have more red light institutions, a trend that there were fewer red light institutions for 15 consecutive years. Now, in the last 2 years, that number has increased. And of the red light institutions, those institutions that clearly and substantially restrict student expression with at least one policy, 15% of those are public institutions, which are bound by the First Amendment, but yet they maintain unconstitutional policies. And 36, almost a full third of the schools are private institutions that we rate that maintain these policies, many of which promise free speech rights to their students, but do not deliver. Our college free speech rankings surveyed over 58,000 students from 257 colleges. One of the key findings for that is that students, while some of the policies and institutions have gotten better over time, students have showed an increased support for shouting down speakers, one of the key takeaways of that report. Dr. Fox and Dr. Murphy will be happy to know 2 of the top 10 institutions for free expression in our country come from North Carolina, the North Carolina State University and UNC Charlotte. So kudos to the work there. Many institutions are now committing themselves to institutional neutrality, where the institution is not going to be taking positions on hot-button political issues. And that's good progress. And more institutions are voluntarily abandoning their requirements that faculty and students submit so-called DEI statements in order to, for admission, application, promotion, or tenure review. Those are all good things. This body passed the Respecting the First Amendment on Campus Act. That was a great piece of legislation that we hope to see fully enacted during our next session. Title IX litigation has ensured that the Biden administration Title IX rules are enjoined in 26 states, plus many other institutions. Those rules threaten free speech and due process on our campuses. So that litigation has been really helpful. Now for the tough part, institutions failed. Many institutions failed last year. The response to campus protests, many of them allowed anti-Semitic conduct to go unaddressed on college campuses, yet many institutions also punished speech that is protected by the Constitution during those ongoing protests, faced pressure from governmental organizations and entities to punish speech protected by the Constitution, and institutions can and must ensure that free speech rights are protected while ensuring that students remain free from harassment based on protected characteristics. That is a dual obligation they have. It is a tough line to draw, admittedly, but institutions just did not get that right last year and unfortunately faced a lot of calls to censor constitutionally protected speech. That's probably the end of my 3 minutes. I have a lot more to go through that we can talk about during this conversation, but thank you again for your time. We're really happy to be here.
That's excellent work. And again, guys, I'll just reiterate, this is just, it's great for folks who have like minds that want unlike minds to be able to talk also, that you guys are not working out in the wilderness and that you're working together. And so, again, encouraging from one another. Ed.
If you don't mind, I'm going to yield to John to go first among the alumni groups, because he's from Davidson and has the great relationship with you and probably the reason we're all here. And then Tom, and then I'll go last.
All right.
Thanks, Ed, and Congressman Murphy, thank you so much for hosting this once again. Congresswoman Fox, Congressman Owens, so great that this means a lot to us out in the field fighting. It's great to have your support. And Greg, especially Congressman Murphy, especially all you do for Davidson in our battle at our shared alma mater for freedom of expression, viewpoint diversity. I'd like to begin just by saying that we are making progress, I feel. and some progress in our battle. At Davidson, we've achieved, were able to get a commitment to freedom of expression statement adopted. And then this year, we have organized the Students for Free Speech Alliance. They're very active. The Young America's Freedom chapter has been rebirthed, as have the Libertarians. And unbelievably, 2 weeks ago, the Young Americans for Freedom brought Art Laffer, supply-side economist Art Laffer, to campus. That would have been unheard of a year ago. So that's some good news. Other good news, as you well know, is the presidential leadership changes that occurred at Harvard, Penn, and Cornell last year as a result of hearings. Good news. At Harvard, this is not, I think, that well known. Harvard has, the interim president of Harvard has just strongly endorsed the report of the Harvard Working Group on Open Inquiry and Constructive Dialogue, which is a good, which among other things calls for a real course on constructive disagreement and how to talk about things, which is, I think, is very, very positive. They've also are reviewing all of their policies at Harvard. So Harvard's doing some things. Of course, the misguided DEI programs in the corporate world are being dismantled. And in some places in universities, we need more such. That's positive. And then in the alumni groups, we now have 27 members of the Alumni Free Speech Alliance, of which some are represented here today. And that's growing really every month. So in a way, this movement is riding a wave, and we need to keep at it. But make no mistake about it, the forces against us, and we deal with them in our institutions, are entrenched. And they don't like us, and they are doing everything possible to stop what we're doing to fight for free speech freedom. And that's why everything the government can do is essential. The federal government can do is essential. I think particularly going after the critical race theory, oppressed versus oppressor mentality in the classroom is absolutely essential, because that, I view, lies at the heart of the problem. It is embedded in all of academia. Now, there are a lot of things that Congress can do, and things that I would encourage. Some of these things you've already gotten away. Read NIH, NEA, the National Endowment for the Humanities, in the grant applications, all DEI requirements. Sorry, it's not a problem. We're not worried about it. That's not what these grants are for. Make federal grants for research and teaching contingent on absence of DEI loyalty oaths, very important for fixing the recruitment of faculty. And mandate that institutions receiving syllabi, federal funds publish their syllabi publicly. We had an issue at Davidson, and we've gotten it resolved. Greg, thank you for your help on this area. I know you've got legislation. The biggest money, of course, is in the student loan program. And Congress long ago lost budgetary control of that. I know it's a big problem, but we really ought to go after it. And I think particularly I'm all for trying some way to get some portion of defaulted loans on the universities and colleges' balance sheets. I think that would be a big step. I emphasize the importance and urgency of these reforms. We saw how impactful hearings can be last year. I think the more hearings you do, the better, bringing the leaders of these institutions to Congress for accountability. So thank you very much for having us again today, and I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, please, sure.
We do have a wonderful piece of legislation called the College Cost Reduction Act, which would do many of the things that you're talking about, John, in terms of having the colleges and universities have skin in the game on the student loan program, and ultimately bring down the cost of college and emphasize the free speech issue along with a lot of other things. So it's called the College Cost Reduction Act 6951, is that right? So look it up. It's really, really a good bill that very comprehensive.
Is that going to get it?
We're like 4 votes short of getting it passed this next week. So you also could pray.
Well, we wish you well. I mean, a substantial part of college loans are consumer loans, let's face it. If we could find some way to deal with that issue.
Well, bringing down the cost of colleges, for one thing, would help with that.
Congressman Murphy, we were talking about CBO projections, and before we sat down, I was head of government relations at the American Bankers Association when they changed the student loan program. And so there's no credit scoring requirement. And we knew it was going to be a disaster, but it was Ted Kennedy, but it was scored very positively. How many billions of dollars have been lost? It was scored positively because, of course, the federal government can borrow more cheaply than banks could. And we were just talking about the problems.
Yeah,
of that.
absolute debacle. Thank you. John, I'll mention briefly, NIH, I have spoken with Jay Budakari, who's going to be taking over NIH. He's just a brilliant physician. He's a friend. Are you leaving? Are you heading out? I just want to say thank you to Dr. Fox. She sadly is relinquishing her chairmanship this year after 8 years of leadership on the committee and doing a great job. She's not going anywhere. She'll always be here. But she's done a fantastic job, and I just want to personally thank her for all the hard work that she's done.
Appreciate it. And again, I appreciate you staying involved with this because we can't do everything on the committee that we'd like to do. And so it's really important that we have support from, when Greg left the committee, he said he would stay engaged, and I'm so grateful.
I'm her best off-committee member. Right? That's right. The benefits are huge. But I've had discussions with Dr. Budakari, and he's going to clean up the NIH, which, we don't need to be spending $250 billion on non-academic pursuits and social justice. Fine, you want to study those in certain areas? Great, but they don't need to be at NIH. So thank you.
Should I go? Yeah. Some brief remarks. Good morning. I'm Tom Neal, University of Virginia alumnus and the co-founder of the Jefferson Council for UVA and the current American Free Speech Alliance chairman. The Jefferson Council, or TJC, was started in September of 2020 in response to a UVA Board of Visitors approved racial equity task force, whose core premise was that UVA was structurally racist. It isn't. Requiring extensive quotas and administrative guardrails with DEI bureaucratic mandates to survive. The overarching conclusion of the task force that galvanized our TJC alumni group was that Thomas Jefferson's stated philosophical reasons for founding UVA were fundamentally flawed. Since he was a slaveholder, it must be contextualized. TJC vehemently rejects this conclusion, believing Jefferson and all leaders throughout world history must be judged in the context of their times. Otherwise, we must reject Mr. Jefferson's innumerable contributions to the founding of our country and his mission statement. Let me just read that briefly. This is what he founded UVA on. This institution was based upon the illimitable freedom of the human mind. For here we are not afraid to follow truth, wherever it may lead, not tolerate error as long as reason is left free to combat it. I was glad to see Congressman Owens quote Jefferson. So glad to hear he resonates here. A few months after starting TJC, I reached out to a similar group at W&L and VMI. They were formed to address the attempts by the progressive administrations to eradicate the well-earned traditions and educational excellence of our universities that have been attained over the past 2 centuries. Through mutual friends, this quickly led to connections with Cornell, Davidson, Princeton alumni groups. Under the able leadership of Ed Yingling, who started our group, we collectively decided to form the Alumni Free Speech Alliance in early 2021. We were united by our common goal to restore true intellectual diversity and civil discourse in American higher ed. ASH has grown to 27 active chapters, and we are aggressively seeking other university alumni who are willing to join us. We fully understand that this is a long-term battle for the academic and intellectual future of our children and our grandchildren. This is why we are working so hard. We are not a group of disgruntled alumni seeking to return our alma maters to the good old days. Rather, we insist that they no longer be run by zealots who disdain encouraging multiple viewpoints and return to institutions of higher learning that, to quote Mr. Jefferson, follow truth wherever it may lead. Thank you for your time, and I'll answer any questions.
Thank you for inviting me to participate. I'm Ed Yingling, and I'm a co-founder of Princetonians for Free Speech and of the Alumni Free Speech Alliance, of which I served as the first chair. John Craig and I have been privileged to participate in all 4 of these roundtables, Congressman Murphy. At the first roundtable, participants identified the problems that were causing many universities to turn away from their core missions of education and advancement of knowledge and to become little more than indoctrination camps. At that roundtable, that first, and we talked about possible solutions, but we knew we had a long way to go. Today, we can finally say we are making real progress, but the problems are still deeply entrenched. Most unfortunately, a major catalyst to our progress was the tragic terrorist attack on Israel and the resulting protest and anti-Semitism, which finally laid out for all to see the rot that was going on campus. Particularly, your hearing was so important in that. I know I can speak for many alumni in thanking the members here today sincerely for their leadership through statements, hearings, and now legislation in moving forward the needed changes. And there is progress. At Princeton 4 years ago, the only discussion of free speech in the freshman orientation was an attack on it by a radical professor, the only discussion. This year, the president of the university led a lengthy discussion on free speech before the entire entering class. Last spring at Princeton, there were several student-led events that we supported with speakers who would have been shouted down in the past. In fact, one of them had been attacked at another university, but the only protests at Princeton were appropriate and not disruptive. This year, Princeton faculty from across the political spectrum have formed a growing coalition to support academic freedom at Princeton. That could not have happened in the past. Our alumni group is supporting all these efforts, and more alumni are making a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. It's beyond my comprehension that of what happened on campuses in lieu of what happened on October the 7th. I'll just share with you, my wife and I were in Israel 2 years ago, February, and spent a day on Kfar Aza, one of the kibbutzes, where you overlooked and you can see onto the, into Gaza. Every single person in that kibbutz was either killed, maimed, or taken hostage. And for the radical elements to pop up on these campuses supporting barbarians, I'm not saying the Israelis have issues, but the fact that you had college presidents either actively supporting or tacitly approving had ramifications. And they had ramifications right here in Congress, and there were some appropriate measures taken. That poison, that cancer still is present. And again, sunlight really disinfects very, very well. So thank you very much. Kenny.
Hi.
You on deck?
Congressman. Thank you. Appreciate it. Kenny Hsu, I'm the executive director of Davidsonians for Freedom of Thought and Discourse. I just want to make my remarks short. John, who is the chairman of Davidsonians for Freedom of Thought and Discourse, said a lot, and I don't want to belabor those points about DEI. I just want to say that free speech is not a partisan issue. It is not something that should be reduced to liberals and conservatives. The FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education, found with a survey of 34,000 students that 70% of them say that they feel uncomfortable disagreeing with a professor in class. 70%. I can assure you that 70% of students are not conservative. At Davidson, the same survey said that 61% of students are uncomfortable disagreeing with a professor. 64% are uncomfortable sharing their views on social media, and 58% are uncomfortable sharing them in a public platform. Free speech is an issue that is personal to a lot of people. We grew up in a generation of information. We should be able to share information. Regardless of your beliefs, it is an American value. It is a value that brings Americans together. Does it sometimes spark discussions? Yes, but that is what America should be about. We should be able to air our disagreements out to each other with reason, not with force. And that's the problem that's facing campuses across the nation, is that force is being used rather than reason to resolve disagreements. When you have DEI statements being used in hiring to say you must follow a particular ideological script to get hired or admitted to college or medical school, those are issues. A student at the Columbia College of Dentistry told me that his teacher told him that to recite a certain script about abortion to any pregnant person who would come to them experiencing pelvic pain. These are issues that should not be resolved with force and authoritarianism, but with reason. I am a true believer in that, and I look forward to answering questions.
Thanks, Kenny, and thanks for the work that you're doing at Davidson. It brings always good hearts. I still have very, very fond memories. 2 of my kids went there, still paying their bills. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, thank you for the work you do. Kyle.
Thank you so much, and thanks to everybody for attending this. It's really, really heartening to see a group of this many dedicated individuals really working to tackle these difficult issues. And thank you, of course, Rep. Murphy, for the invitation and for putting this together. It's great to see that we, 4 years in, are continuing this proud tradition. It's a little bit disheartening to see that it's still necessary, of course, but our rights aren't things that simply maintain themselves. It's required actively for us to defend our rights to free speech and the rights of free speech for every student, as well as faculty member and staff and administrator on college campuses. As a few folks have already said, I find myself relatively hopeful this year, though. The ideological stratification that we've been seeing on college campuses has really only been possible because of the public's ignorance and their misplaced trust in higher education. While occasionally we see egregious cases making their way onto the public consciousness, say, for instance, Casey Johnson's tenure denial at CUNY and the UPenn's infamous water buffalo incidents, by and large, policymakers and the public have been unaware of the vast sensorial machines that colleges and universities have been building up to police free speech, enforce censorship, and maintain ideological hegemony in the name of protecting and supporting their students. We at the American Council of Trustees and Alumni, or ACTA, we are an independent, nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to safeguarding academic freedom, as well as free speech on campus, academic excellence, as well as accountability in higher education. We've been monitoring this trend for quite some time, as I'm sure that many of us here have been, and I'm sure that many of us have been frustrated by that lack of attention that these issues have been given. So it's, again, heartening to see these things start to more migrate into that public consciousness. Previously, whenever ACTA would speak with trustees, administrators, or policymakers, the first thing that we'd hear about the worst excesses of this campus illiberalism was that, well, that can't happen here. It doesn't happen here, and it won't happen here. I've personally seen lobbyists from large public institutions use this argument to kill their state legislators' bipartisan bills to safeguard the rights of teachers and students on campus. This excuse has now lost all credibility, while calls for transparency have broad bipartisan support. ACTA has explored the pretense on several campuses by doing surveys of their students large enough to capture the experiences of both conservative, liberal, as well as religious subgroups. And again, as Kenny, as you just mentioned, there's really been a clear indication that this is not something that a single student subgroup is experiencing, but rather this is something that's broadly felt by students across the ideological spectrum. Now, it is important to note that these issues did not begin this year, nor did they begin in the past decade. For example, the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, or OCR, recently settled 9 complaints made against the City University of New York, or CUNY, New York City's public university system. One of these published complaints alleged that anti-Semitic harassment on CUNY campuses has become so commonplace as to be almost normalized, and lists several incidents dating as far back as 2013. Indeed, when Lawrence Summers was president of Harvard, he admonished the community about the growth of campus anti-Semitism over 22 years ago. So these issues have a long historical trend, and I'm happy to see that they're starting to get introduced again and starting to make their way onto the public consciousness. As you said very aptly, Rep. Murphy, sunlight is the best disinfectant here, and I'm really interested in listening to a lot of the folks here, particularly our alumni groups at APSFA that have been doing phenomenal work outside of campus, as well as students that have been doing phenomenal work on campus. I can't wait to see this alliance, this group of like-minded and dedicated individuals trying to do their best to improve American higher education, because ultimately that's what we're all here for.
Great. Thank you, Kyle. Jasmine.
Good morning. My name is Jasmine Jordan, and I'm currently a senior at the University of Iowa. I also serve as the National Chairwoman of Young Americans for Freedom. I'm very grateful for the chance to address you all today at the annual Free Speech Roundtable. 1 year ago, I testified before the House Judiciary Committee on Free Speech and Anti-Semitism, hoping to see concrete actions, not just words, taken to protect conservative students on campus. Sadly, the administration on my campus and so many others has shown no effort to change the climate for students like me. The personal challenges I faced reflect the wider struggle on campuses around the country and the ongoing lack of action. In last year's testimony, I recounted a very unsettling experience where a man who believes he's a woman repeatedly stalked outside my bedroom door, pressing his ear against it to determine if I was inside. His actions were driven by outrage over my conservative views. His relentless and escalating behavior over the course of a year ultimately reached a point where the university was forced to issue a long overdue no-contact order. Unfortunately, my experience is far from unique. Conservative students across the country, especially those involved in YAF chapters, continue to face similar threats and challenges that directly violate their First Amendment rights. This widespread issue has led to YAF taking action, including filing lawsuits and sending demand letters to university administrators in an effort to protect students' rights and ensure free speech is upheld on campuses. As students across the country prepare to begin another academic year, the University of Tampa went a step further. The university's RA training included a scenario where students were asked what they would do if a resident felt unsafe because their roommate was a conservative. This situation depicted in the training described a student seeking a room change because their roommate had posted a Make America Great Again flag and was a member of YAF. At St. Louis University, 2 members of the YAF chapter faced disciplinary action for organizing the YAF's 9/11 Never Forget Project memorial display to honor the 2,977 victims of the 2001 terrorist attacks. The university specifically objected to a banner featured in the display, which highlighted the shared values between the United States and Israel in the fight against radical Islamic terrorism. Despite prior approval for the display, the university took action against the students, even though it allowed pro-Hamas students to violate campus policies without any repercussions. Furthermore, at Stetson University, the YAF chapter faced disciplinary charges for posting flyers that the administration labeled as disrespectful to the so-called transgender TikTok star Dylan Mulvaney. The flyers created to promote the event critiqued the left's gender ideology and ongoing assaults on masculinity, featured the headline, "Bring Back Real Men," along with an image of American soldiers and a crossed-out picture of Mulvaney. And then, on the one-year anniversary of Hamas's heinous October 7th assault on Israel, YAF student activists marked the occasion with memorial displays that honored the innocent victims and those still held captive by Hamas, in addition to campus lectures presenting the truth about Israel and its enemies. However, extreme pro-Hamas students and officials actively opposed these efforts at several universities. Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University's YAF chapter was informed by administration that it was not permitted to erect an Israeli flag display on the campus in Prescott, Arizona. At first, the University of Georgia's administration delayed allowing the YAF chapter to display Israeli flags, and eventually they permitted the memorial, providing protection to safeguard the flags. However, bike racks had to be used to shield the flags from leftist students amid concerns about extreme pro-Hamas activity on campus. Leftist students at my school, University of Iowa, vandalized a banner promoting Jewish and conservative commentator Ian Haworth's talk, reciting pro-terrorism slogans that demanded the extermination of Israel and the slaughter of Jews. And then at Michigan Waterford Kettering High School, YAF students were denied recognition for their chapter and prohibited displaying the Israeli flags in remembrance. So the list of these incidents goes on, reinforcing the mounting bias and demonization faced by conservative students across the nation. Thank you.
Gosh, thank you so very much, Jasmine, and thank you for your courage. We can sit here and talk as alumni groups being a little bit apart, but when you guys are in the midst of this, facing it every day and in classrooms and in dorms, thank you for your courage and thank you for your great work with the group. So, Gabby.
Good morning, and thank you, Congressman. Thank you for inviting Young America's Foundation to join this discussion again. I'm Gabby Dankanich, and I am YAF's Capitol Hill Outreach Director. There's much to say regarding the issue of the status of free speech across the country, and the state of free speech on college campuses demonstrates quite well how the First Amendment is regarded post-education. At YAF, we have always had a focus on this issue, and for good reason. This, of course, includes the 1988 Supreme Court case, Booz v. Berry, an opinion written by Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. YAF had challenged a DC law prohibiting critical displays of foreign governments by their embassies, and we won the case. Our students around the United States face incredible backlash, not only from mob-like students, but also from college administrators. Jasmine, our national chairwoman, went a bit in depth about this as well. As students go out on their campuses advocating for conservative values and attempting to have the necessary conversations on issues from traditional American values to the free market to gender ideology, they are frequently met with backlash from other students and administrators. For instance, consider a blatant example of free speech violations at Clovis Community College in Fresno, California. Following targeted ideological discrimination for distributing flyers promoting YAF's Freedom Week initiative, YAF students filed a federal lawsuit against the college's president, Dr. Lori Bennett, and other administrators. To keep it very brief, the administrators sought to remove approved flyers by the recognized campus YAF chapter, limiting materials to a quote-unquote free speech kiosk. Given this is extremely illegal, the defendant school district agreed to a settlement resolving the free speech issues at stake. With this victory, all students are protected from viewpoint discrimination and obscure regulations within the district. I think it's safe to say the state of college campuses has gotten significantly worse since October 7th, 2023. The sheep-like mentality college leftists have succumbed to has brought out horrific levels of anti-Semitism, a problem that has always existed, and it took a horrific terrorist attack to bring it to further light. YAF has always and will continue to stand with Israel. Since October 7th, our chapters have brought speakers to campus, dispelling the revolting lies Hamas supporters propagandize. Additionally, as a response to the disgusting support for Hamas we've seen, YAF launched our Stand with Israel Activism Resource Hub. There, students are able to find resources from necessary information to pro-Israel swag, invitations for YAF speakers on the topic, and a way to join our organization in putting on Israeli flag displays to remember the lives lost, hostages taken, and all the atrocities from October 7th and since. We've assisted numerous schools across the country in showing support for both Israel and Jewish students on campuses through this initiative. As part of these efforts, students at the University of California, Los Angeles were set to host Robert Spencer for a lecture entitled "Everything You Know About Palestine is Wrong." Unfortunately, UCLA administrators caved to pro-Hamas agitators and their own anti-Israel biases, claiming there were security concerns as an excuse to block this event. Naturally, we filed a lawsuit alongside YAF activists Brooke Brohl and Macy Ropke. Administrators allowed anti-Israel events and demonstrations to take place while shutting down those that were pro-Israel. Falling for the heckler's veto, the public school, which takes taxpayer dollars, willfully violated students' rights to free speech. Known well as a hotspot of anti-Semitism on U.S. campuses, UCLA approved an event with the co-founder of the BDS movement and has classes on Zionist settlement policy. Meanwhile, administrators locked the doors of reserved rooms for pro-Israel students. Represented by the Mountain States Legal Foundation and LexRex Institute, YAF and YAF students will see this ongoing lawsuit through. I could give quite a few other examples of the insanity that is college campuses, but I'll leave it here for now. So thank you, and I look forward to continuing this discussion.
Thank you so much, Gabby. Let me just say this. As I'm listening, particularly with the experience of YAF, and I have so much respect for what you guys do. And as Dr. Murphy just mentioned, you're on the front line. What's interesting is I remember this when I was a kid in the days of KKK, Jim Crow, and segregation down south. It was young people, again, like yourself, that was actually on the front line. So I can't say enough about how proud we are of you, your courage. It's different to be outside looking in and talking about this as opposed to be inside and dealing with this every day, particularly when it's coming from people that we expect to protect us. We have administrators, presidents who cowardly sit around and watch this happen and think there's nothing wrong with it. Just know that the cavalry is coming. We have a new administration coming in. We have a body of legislators who get it. And we're not going to stand by and watch them let this happen. We fought too long, too hard to get ourselves to where we become a more perfect union of where we are now, and we have to continue to stay that course. So, just know I'm excited about being part of the solution. Thank each and every one of you guys for standing up against this craziness. It's gone on way too long. We're going to finally do something about it. Let me just say one other thing. The other side of DEI, yes, it is divisive, but it also teaches people of color like myself to hate others. I grew up at a time we were trying to bring ourselves together and bring that divide down. We're now teaching Black people, minorities, that first of all, you cannot think you're not as smart as others, so you have to bring down the barrier, bring down the bar. And then if you don't win, somebody's fault with that. So all this, we'll get back to where merit is what we go for. Merit is what we're going to respect, and I'm again looking forward to being part of that solution.
Great. Thank you, Burgess. You know, it cringes me to think of the level of anti-Semitism that we are seeing. You know, I studied late 1920s, the 1930s in Germany and in Europe in that regard. And not that I want to make any type of analogy to that time, but there are plenty of analogies that are happening. There becomes only one thought. There becomes a group that is metered out, that is the enemy. And it is just anathema that you would see anybody participating in that of any type of administration on college campuses. And just like Representative Burgess said, we thank you guys, and we are behind you guys 100%. So thank you. All right, Therese is...
Great. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Sharice Trump, no relation to the current president-elect Donald Trump, although we probably do share opinions on free speech, I think. But thank you so much for hosting this annual event. This is actually, I think, really helpful, like you were saying, to get all of us in the same room, but also to create video services that we can actually send around to everyone who wants to learn more about these issues. So I think this is really valuable to the free speech movement for sure. I'm the executive director of Speech First. We are a nonprofit organization, a student membership organization, where we sue universities that violate the free speech rights of students and hold them accountable when they do so. We were founded in 2018 because of the fact that it was really apparent that the situation on campuses with regards to free speech was actually getting significantly worse over the years. And we were seeing universities start to use certain policies to target and censor constitutionally protected speech. And those policies that we sue universities on are things like bias response teams, which are these anonymous reporting systems where students are actually encouraged to report on one another for incidents of bias. And the universities often define bias as pretty much anything you can imagine: microaggressions, misgendering, being mean, offensive speech, mean jokes, stereotyping. Those are all terms that the universities use. I didn't just make those up. And that is basically what they are targeting and telling students to report on one another for. So, you know, you're talking about calling back to historic events. Think of the Stasi in East Germany, where neighbors are being asked to report on neighbors anonymously. And the sad and scary part actually is that these reporting mechanisms are being used more than you would like to think. Students' first reactions now are to report something to figures of authority when they're even remotely offended, rather to engage with one another. And that in itself should tell us about the state of free speech on college campuses, and it should tell us where we need to start focusing our efforts. So we sue universities, public universities, on that issue specifically. We have a case right now pending cert for the Supreme Court against Indiana University for their bias response team. To paint a quick picture of the state of Indiana University's free speech situation, this is a campus that a year or two ago had a sign on their campus alerting students that if you or anyone that you know has been impacted by a free speech event, here are the 17 counseling services available to you on campus to help you get through that. So that's the campus that put that sign up. They are also incredibly, I heard something about bike racks earlier. This is actually interesting because schools clearly copy each other. The pro-life group notoriously on that campus is told that they have to put bicycle racks around their events in order for safety purposes, but really it prevents students from walking up to their tables and gaining information on the issue. So again, there's a lot of things going on that campus specifically, but their bias response team is one of the worst that we've ever seen, so that's why we sued them on behalf of our student members there. If SCOTUS takes up our case, it will be the first, and this is relevant to this meeting's topic, it will be the first free speech higher ed case before the Supreme Court since 2010. And I think we can all agree here that a lot has happened on campuses with regards to free speech in the last 15 years. So that's just something to point out. And I think most of the groups around this table have actually supported us in our endeavor by writing amicus briefs for our lawsuits. Another one, in addition to bias response teams, is the weaponization of harassment policies. Tyler kind of talked about this a little bit via Title IX, but it's important to recognize that universities actually have multiple harassment policies or anti-discrimination policies apart from Title VI and Title IX. And it's oftentimes because they believe that it has not gone far, that Title IX and Title VI have not gone far enough. So you'll see the weaponization of these to target constitutionally protected speech. We're suing Texas State University on this right now. We've won against the University of Central Florida and the 11th Circuit on this issue, basically saying that anything can be considered harassing conduct that is offensive, mean, or intimidating. Again, very vague and broad phrasing for public schools, especially when it comes to their obligation to the Constitution and the First Amendment. So we're waiting for the Fifth Circuit to make a decision on that. We just argued against Texas State on that issue specifically. On both of these issues, we've won in major circuit courts, which is why it's, I think that when we talk about positive reactions and kind of what we're seeing this year to be optimistic about, the courts are ready for these issues. We encourage everyone to bring the cases to them that are valid, and also the public is ready for this issue. I think we saw with the election that there's a mandate being by the American public against DEI. And this is something that when we talk about DEI officers are usually on these bias response teams on college campuses. They are usually leading the charge. They are the ones trying to target and censor speech most of the time on campuses. But it's important to also recognize that the bureaucracies on campuses are inordinately large. They are, there's campuses like Duke University where there's more administrators than students. That's not including faculty, that's just administrators. And so again, thinking about where the funding is going and when we're talking about DEI, I think is an important talking point. One more point on Title IX. Title IX, we actually are suing the Biden-Harris administration on this issue. There is a free speech angle here that's important, and I've touted this to Congress before and brought it up many times. There is an important, in the 2020 rule, there was an important free speech protection that was added. It's a Supreme Court precedent called the Davis Standard. Excuse me. And the Davis Standard is basically one of the best protections for free speech in Title IX, while also protecting students from harassing conduct. It basically says that in order for speech to be considered harassing conduct, it has to be so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it prevents students from having equal access to education. The Biden administration basically jettisoned that when they rewrote the rule, and they also added gender identity as a protected class. By doing those two things, what it does is it opens the doorway for universities basically having a federal mandate to do what they've already been doing, which is to target students who speak out against men participating in women's sports and other transgender issues, because now they can be reported to Title IX offices for having those conversations. So we have sued on and won in the 11th Circuit for a preliminary injunction to stop that rule. Obviously, we expect the new Department of Education coming in with the Trump administration to hopefully get us back to where we were on the 2020 rule with those important speech protections. One more thing I'll mention, I know I keep saying one more thing, but so we've released a report earlier this spring on DEI. So the reason we did this report is because there's been a lot of really good efforts to defund DEI on campus, and I applaud those efforts, and I think they're really important. What needs to happen is you defund, turn off the spigot, and defund the administrations that are putting the bad policies in place. But we need to recognize that these policies have been in place for over a decade, and they have worked themselves into various aspects and areas within the culture on campus. So it's not just the DEI administration. So you say, okay, let's defund, no DEI officers, no DEI department. Okay, get rid of that, that's great. One, they'll repurpose into Title IX or Title VI offices, which we've already seen. And Texas did a good job kind of trying to stop that and saying, no, you actually just have to get rid of these staff. But they'll also, in the actual academic departments, in places like the medical schools and the law schools, there are separate DEI officers. There are separate DEI requirements that do not require DEI administrators in order to exist. So they're self-sustaining. And we put a report out on one issue in particular, looking at what kind of coercion is taking place at the curriculum level. And we found that 67% of the campuses, public and private across the country, are mandating students to take DEI full semester long courses in order to satisfy gen ed requirements. And this is just undergrad, so I can't even imagine what it is in other programs as well. And 59% of those were public schools. So there is a lot that states can do. We put a model policy out on this, basically saying, we call it the Freedom from Indoctrination Act. You can't mandate DEI or ideological courses in order for students to graduate. You could, we also suggest in that model policy that maybe how about mandate civics courses or constitutional studies courses in order to graduate. Students should be able to understand the basic inner workings of our government and legal system before they enter the public space, I think. But that's what the DEI report said. And Dr. Murphy, to your point on medical schools, we are actually now, hope to get it out sometime January, February. And it's regarding coercion taking place and censorship taking place in medical schools specifically. And I will tell you some of the stuff we found is appalling and very scary with regards to the medical field. And then what future doctors are being told they have to talk to individuals about. I think that's, I'll leave it at that. I do agree that there has been a lot of progress.
Holding colleges accountable, defunding them, taking away these their opportunity for them to feed themselves, to feed this hatred is something we're going to get done. What we need to do, though, in the process again is to have the input to know just how to get that done. We look forward to getting that done. I have a question when we get done, but I just want to make that statement.
So, who is John Galt, right? That's where we are. That painfully listened to that book, 59 hours just driving in the car, but it was just a great eye opener. It is so refreshing to see, that we have organizations, we have alumni groups, we have students who are in the fray right now. We have external folks that were just out of the fray. This is the amalgamation. This is the full armamentarium that we need to fight. Happening now in some of our medical schools. My picture was put up on a medical school slide, a cardiology conference about 8 weeks ago, that I was like public enemy number one, and that they, regardless of this, they were going to move around their admissions process to make sure that students had been activists, to make sure they'd been participating in voter enrollment, to make sure they had been participating in things like BLM marches, et cetera. They were going to work and move things around. So you're right. You don't just defund this. You have to stop it everywhere. Because inherently, as Representative Burgess says, inherently DEI is divisive. It puts us all in a different category that, hey, if we don't get what we want, we are oppressed, somebody else is to blame. It absolutely is a cancer to what's happening here in the United States. And there are folks who just come hell or high water, no matter what we are, they're going to fight it. We have seen, fortunately, the rollback, not only in business institutions, but now at some universities. Sadly enough, Davidson still doubles down on it. But again, to my greatest heart, seeing it where patient care is involved, patients are going to suffer and patients are going to die. We have so much to talk about in so little time. I do want to just bring out this whole thing. I believe it's Maxient at Davidson. It is the self-reporting system. And there is nothing more nefarious that I can think of where you can't be yourself, which is what college is all about. It's learning about yourself, it's testing your beliefs, it's listening to other beliefs, that if you are afraid to do something because someone gets offended, and that there is a reporting system, I just wondered if people could talk about that just for 2 seconds. We got a lot of other stuff to talk about.
I'll give you a real specific anecdote. 3 weeks ago, a student at UVA had MACA, Make America Christian Again. It's a joke.
Yeah.
Went into a political science class. That reporting system, and as you know, you don't know who reported it. He got reported. He got called into the EOCR department for a 20-minute inquisition, like the Stasi. And they weren't rude, but they said, "Do you realize that hat could offend people?" And he said, "How could anybody be offended by saying Make America Christian Again?" "Well, we'd like you to take it off." He said, "No, I'm not going to do it."
Good.
So he wears it every day. But that's how incredible it is. And he said, "Can I speak to the person who did this?" And they said, "No."
Yeah.
And that's only one example. You can't even praise Christianity as a jocular situation with a hat.
Yeah, I mean,
offends people.
And this is a problem because it is becoming the mommy state of 1981 Orwellian, that this group is going to tell you what to do, and you are literally afraid to do anything. It is devastating.
This is recently just mentioned?
2 weeks ago. And Rich Lowry's a UVA alum. National Review picked this up and put it online.
To the point made earlier, this ideology is tenacious. It will morph in a heartbeat. So we have to make sure we stay on top of it, realize that the focus is teach the teachers, and they go and teach our kids, so it gets deeper and deeper into younger people, and this is what the long game has been. So the upsides, we now have these conversations, we now understand it, and we have a conference, a Congress that's really going to be talking with innovators, make sure we can dig this stuff out, because it is, the future of our country depends on us making sure we take care of this for sure.
You know, the term microaggression is the most ridiculous word I've ever heard. You know, sorry, Ed, I don't like your tie. It's giving me a microaggression. Although it is kind of good. It's not the real world. I remember one of the board members when I was on at Davidson saying that she wanted to keep the students in a bubble as long as they can. Wow. And I stood up and I said, that is the greatest disservice you could ever do to a student, because they leave this bubble here on the college, and there's a real world out there. So you're actually making their entrance into the real world much more difficult.
Yeah, just a quick comment, sorry, on the microaggressions. When I ask students to define a microaggression, they oftentimes don't know, because they're told that you will know it when you see it. So to create a policy, or what people are advocating for in some cases, a law around something that you can't even clearly define, is already ridiculous enough on itself. But then some universities do define it as, it can be anything from as simple as asking where someone is from, or why they're majoring in a specific topic. And so when students don't know what could be considered, what could be reported, ultimately they just stop engaging, which is what Kenny was talking about. They do not engage, they do not speak up in class. Faculty tell me all the time that they do not open their classroom up for discussion anymore towards the end. They just lecture and leave because they're afraid of being reported for creating an unsafe environment. So this is kind of the mentality of a lot of people are operating in right now.
Congressman, if I could make a couple of points on this. One, I appreciate both of you talking about the importance of students, but I know all the alumni groups take it as one of our major functions to be supporting students, so they know they have an alumni group that has a lot of resources behind them. In addition to the reporting, which is a terrible problem, it can be what happens after the reporting, because the student can, you had an example of a single event, but a student can be caught up in a Kafkaesque, not knowing what's going on, not knowing how long it's going on, behind the scenes investigation. And the worst example, a couple of years ago, I'm a Stanford Law grad, was the All-American soccer player at Stanford who got investigated because she got mad at a great athlete and threw a cup of coffee on him because he had done something to one of her friends. And he didn't file the complaint. The university got the complaint. And it went on and on and on. She didn't know what was going on. Her parents didn't know what was going on. And right before graduation, the university came to her and said, privately, and said, we don't know if you're going to graduate because we have to resolve this. Months later, she killed herself. But she had no, her parents didn't know. She had no idea what was going on.
Just know what's made our country the country is we are risk takers. We don't mind rushing toward our fear. And this is an antithesis of everything that we stand for. To teach our kids not to take any risk, to be any bit of stress, you pull back, be quiet, you stay in your place. This is at the very core of destroying our culture right from within. So I do have a question, because we talked about what we can do in terms of identifying, defunding, putting parameters. We have YAF, we have kids that are working from within. When you think of faculty, what is it that faculties are, the members that are hearing this conversation, what can we do, what can they do to be a part of the solution, to make sure that we have this idea of the diversity of thoughts? Any ideas of what their participation might be in this process?
And I'm sorry, the question was faculty?
For faculty, yes.
We're pretty tight with the number of our faculty. And I'll just tell you, Congressman, that the fear factor is enormous. They can't speak up.
Yeah.
I'll give you another specific example. There's a fellow named Alan Stam, who was the president or the dean of the Batten School of Leadership at UVA. It was a new school 20 years ago. We took it to a top 5 status. Our current president came in. The first thing he said to him was, 2 weeks into his tenure, you're demoted. You're not dean anymore. I said, gosh, why? He said, we've lost the support of the faculty. He said, who are they? Can I speak to him? No. Well, Alan he ran an apolitical Batten School of Leadership, but his background is Cornell, heavyweight crew, Special Forces, armor officer, doctorate from Michigan, teacher of the year at Dartmouth before he came to us. He happens to be conservative, but he doesn't wear it on his sleeve. That was his sin. Thank God he stayed there, but he was removed from his position 2 weeks into President Ryan's tenure for being a white conservative male. So he has the guts to stand up, but he's a Special Forces Green Beret.
Yeah.
Most faculty aren't, and they're petrified. And another quick example, this is students. The anti-Semitism at UVA is almost as bad as it is at Columbia. My group, and this is what a lot of AFSA chapters do, our goal is to be activists and really help the students more than anything else. I don't know if you know Larry Sabato in the Center for Politics. It's pretty well known. He's liberal, but a classic liberal. He's co-sponsored speakers with us. I went to him in May, and we're going to have a Gaza-Israeli debate early next year. We cannot get, and I'm not saying this accusatorily, we cannot get a Jewish student at UVA to step up to be on the dais. Now, Alan Stam, the guy I just mentioned, is going to be there. There are 200 faculty who would line up and be pro-Palestinian. And we have a Student for Justice in Palestine chapter that's very militant. They're lining up to do it. So the guy that I mentioned with the Maca hat, his name is Simon Goldstein. His dad's Jewish, his mom was Christian. He's now Christian, but he's going to speak for it. But that's how afraid the Jewish students are to come out. And it's not just fear. I mean, we represented a kid named Matan Goldstein. He was physically attacked. He went to an SJP rally. Quietly, didn't say a word, just had an Israeli flag. They accosted him, ripped his yarmulke off, spit on him. We helped him get legal aid. He sued the university, and they settled out of court.
Okay.
Now, that's not our goal. We don't like suing the university. But we tell the students, we're your wingman.
Yeah.
We will not let them go after you.
John?
I do think faculty is at the heart of the problem. I mean, at Davidson, Congressman Murphy Wells knows, we have been successful in getting students stepping forward. We've had virtually no success in getting the faculty. I know that the few faculty that are basically on our side generally don't attend faculty meetings because they're so dysfunctional. Yeah. So what can we do? Again, on the DEI loyalty oaths in the hiring process, anything you can do to make grants contingent on that you can't have these kind of oaths. We've now had essentially 2 generations of these sort of DEI people inbred into the institution, and they're self-reinforcing. So we've got to counteract that. I think things that are happening like at Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, that has set up a separate school on civic discourse is a good thing, and we're advocating that at Davidson. And the idea is that schools like this will ultimately attract people with more diverse points of view. So any kind of grant mechanisms you can do to support the creation of these kinds of schools would be a big step.
On that same point, so it's important that students are made comfortable with engaging with opposing ideas. So we need more conservative faculty ultimately. A number of studies have shown that over 90%, I think it's over 95% of faculty currently are either vote for Democrats or contribute to Democratic campaigns. So we need more diversity in the faculty, and universities, maybe there could be a grant process that helps them prioritize viewpoint diversity in their hiring process. In addition to that, there's a number of these schools on that point that are popping up. I testified recently in Ohio because they're going to be opening a number of schools on their various campuses with regards to civics and constitutional studies and open discourse. And these schools or these institutes are kind of popping up everywhere, and they're going to create nice kind of homes essentially for either conservative faculty or faculty who respect free speech and constitutional policy or constitutional principles. Ultimately, though, there needs to be more of that, and we need to create the pipeline. So it's on conservative faculty, it's on people who want to play devil's advocate in the classroom and expose students to opposing viewpoints, have the conversations. It's up to them to stay in the academy, because a lot of them are the ones who are most outspoken are getting out or they're getting kicked out in various ways. So we just have to create avenues, create pipelines for them so that they can get tenure, so that they can be successful in their academic careers without being ostracized.
Yeah, there's I think it was, I banished the thought on 60 Minutes, a report of a school in Texas now that basically is a freedom of discourse school. And it has both liberals and conservatives there. It's a college, and they've got a lot of money from both conservative and liberal donors to make it a cauldron, actually, where we can have these things again. And I was very, very heartened to see that. The narrator asked the large Democratic donor, "Do you want to be part of this? Why would you want to be part of this?" And she said, "This is what's needed." And so it's good to, it can't just be a liberal conservative issue. I think it's more of an ideological my way or the highway issue, which tends to be a little bit more on that side of the stream. So, Tyler.
Yeah, the piece of the University of Austin, this new university inside the University of Austin.
Austin, yeah, okay.
And two things first about faculty. Representative, you introduced a resolution condemning political litmus tests in hiring for faculty. Great first step. A lot of states have passed legislation prohibiting that practice. FIRE, we have our model Intellectual Freedom Protection Act, which prohibits the use of political litmus tests in hiring and for admission for students. Not only hiring, but promotion and tenure review, those sorts of things. So that's a really great first step. Not the only step to help promote viewpoint diversity in higher ed, but a really good first step. Second, with regard to students, what we found in our research, particularly our college free speech rankings, students, when they identify that their administration lets it be known that the school stands for free expression, then the culture for free expression among students is much better. In your home state of North Carolina, the state legislature requires that each public institution in the state provide First Amendment and free speech training for orientation and for transfer students. I had the pleasure this August of being at the UNC Asheville before the hurricane to talk to students during orientation. The university reached out to 2 fire attorneys to come help lead, along with the administration. Here's what free speech means. I did that as a lawyer. And their administration said, here's what our policies do in practice. And along with their general counsel, who has announced that they are fully dedicated to protecting free expression, hopefully over time, not only at UNC Asheville where we were, but through other public institutions in the state and elsewhere, other states have done this too, really setting the tone for students that, hey, you're gonna encounter some ideas and some people you disagree with even vehemently, here's the tools to deal with that. We don't teach, sometimes like, it's really easy to make fun of students when they react poorly to ideas they don't like. But they're also like sort of trained to do that from a young age, providing them the resources to learn how to engage and not call for censorship immediately, which is really easy to do, but getting them to really struggle and to understand, yes, people disagree, people have different ideas than me, here's how you deal with that. Those skills will not only benefit their college experience, but once they graduate and enter our society and our workforce, be those really bedrock skills for them there too.
Well,
Can I add just one? The word pipeline was mentioned earlier, and what we have to recognize is we are truly at war, ideology war. And it's a long-term, intergenerational one, and we have to recognize we just cannot continue to play whack-a-mole. We see an issue, and we just kind of whack at it, knowing that they have a longer-term process. So we have to start as early as K through 12 to give parents choice. If we see this kind of crazy stuff being taught in our schools, they need to be able to take their kids and put them someplace else where they can and prosper. That will take the pressure off our higher education to now have to retrain our kids. So it's going to be a longer-term process. Great things we're having this conversation, guys. This has been decades overdue. And now that we know, now that we're going through this process, we're getting American people behind us, we're going to start looking at ways to make sure our pipeline is stronger going into higher education. So when they come out of that process, they go and be productive Americans, proud of who we are, and not having to retrain them to love our nation. So.
Well, guys, I'm going to wrap up. I want to thank Representative Burgess and then Dr. Fox was here, and all of you guys. We could do this for hours because I think it's a discussion that is worthy to have. I'm encouraged because we have a lot of folks with strong will and strong purpose that are doing the right things in the right way to help our students, to help full free engagement, which elevates everybody. And so just personally, and I know Representative Burgess and Dr. Fox would say the same way, please know that you are supported. Please know that this is a high priority item that is not going to go off our radar, and that we will continue to have these discussions, be they hard sometimes, to make sure that our college campuses are ones for open, freedom, discussion, sometimes disagreement, but it's okay to have that disagreement because people learn that way. No student, no faculty member, no administrator should feel alarmed, should have fear of their job, of their future, because of the pushing behavior, theology of some other group. So just thank you again. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.